What's going on, everybody? And thank you so much for tuning in. Going to be chatting today with my good friend, Mark Timmony. Mark, how's it going?
It's going really well, thank you. Thank you for
Yeah,
having me. Hi.
absolutely. Absolutely. So Mark is the author of The Blood of the Spear, The Eye of Eternity, book number one, the gorgeous Felix Ortiz cover. I'm going to try to get it to where it doesn't have a glare in it.
Yeah.
It's so pretty. And actually was just on a Storytellers on Tour last week where we were supposed to have this chat. But of course, I decided to get ill for it and didn't end up happening. So we're having a little bit of a makeup
It's all
session
right.
today. So I really appreciate you cutting some time out. But Mark, I just want to kind of start out like I always do. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me about, did you read a lot growing up? Who did you read? Who were some of your favorite authors? Maybe some of your favorite books, and kind of how you got into writing.
Sure. For those who don't know, I'm an Australian. I live in Sydney. As I mentioned earlier to you, I'm currently in lockdown again here, which is fun, but I actually quite like it. um, when did I get into reading? So I've always been a bit of a reader. I remember borrowing books from the school library at a young age. Obviously, they were picture books, and I was kind of into anything that was magical. So anything that had witches, dragons, stuff like that on the front cover. I remember watching the early Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, early 80s cartoon, growing up and really being into that. Although I never actually played D&D in my life. I've never done it.
It's okay, I haven't either.
Yeah, so I was really into that, and I would write fanfic about it. Like, I'm talking, I was really young and the stories went absolutely nowhere, but I would use elements from it and the ideas behind it. I thought that was really cool. I was into Doctor Who as well, and I used to borrow the Doctor Who books from the library. Probably a little too advanced for my reading level at the time, but I'd take them and I'd pretend to read them, whatever. And then eventually I went from my primary school to the last 2 years of primary. I moved to another school that started with the last 2 years of primary and moved into high school. And when I was there, I went to the library, and it was a bigger library, it was a better library. And I discovered Dragons of Autumn Twilight by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman, first book of the Dragonlance Chronicles. And it was magic. It just blew me away. All of a sudden, I had a book in my hand that was like the stuff I watched in the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. It was like the little stories I used to run in my head about wizards and dragons and all of that. And I became utterly obsessed with epic fantasy. After that, I didn't know it existed beforehand. So I hadn't been exposed to Tolkien first. I hadn't gone through The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. My introduction to fantasy was Dragonlance. So that was when they were first being published as well. So kind of aging myself here, but that's when I started reading. And from there, I discovered David Eddings. Before it was David and Lee Eddings. I mean, it was always David and Lee Eddings, but his wife didn't have a recognition on the front cover. Feist. I read Herbert as well, the original Dune books. I did try to read Tolkien. I actually never clicked with Tolkien,
Mm.
which is a little, I know, heretical to some people. But I don't know, there was something about his writing that just didn't grab me. I really appreciate what he did and how he did it in the world building, but I just couldn't connect to the story. So I never really read them properly. I think there was a lot of skimming from memory in it.
Mm.
I obviously watched the movies and I really enjoyed the movies, but reading the books, and I have tried to go back. I even have an omnibus up there of it, but I'm just like, yeah, just it will have pride of place on my bookshelf. It's just something that I've never actually read.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so my fanfic of the D&D cartoon became then fanfic of Dragonlance. And I had grand ideas of continuing the story after the trilogies that I read had finished. It never went anywhere, or nothing particular would have happened from it. I found and find writing to be challenging, which is probably why it took me something like 20 years to get Blood of the Spear completed. It won't take me that long to get the next one done. My ability to write has changed dramatically. My experience at writing has changed dramatically, and I know that getting ideas down onto paper once I get over the hurdle of actually having to start it flows fairly quickly. And once I'm in a flow, it happens. But yeah, I read all those things, wrote some fanfic about Dragonlance, and then I discovered The Eye of the World, probably I think it was about 10 months after it originally been released. And I found it at the local library. And yeah, Robert Jordan, I say it all the time, he changed my life in terms of what I was looking for in fantasy books, big epic sagas, and kind of formulated the type of writer I wanted to be, the type of story I wanted to tell, the scope of the story I started imagining. And to this day, when I'm looking for books to read, I always look for something big and chunky, something that's got this massive amount of world building behind it. And I know people don't like prophecies. I actually don't mind them. There are a lot of tropes that some people don't like that I have no problem with, as long as the story is told well.
Yeah.
It was like when I read Aragon for the first time. I know that he's got a massive fan base as well, but there's also some people who criticize how reminiscent it was of other stories. I don't care. It's like, if you it's like wearing comfortable shoes, right? It's like, oh, it's a different color, but that's cool. Give me
Yeah.
characters and give me a slightly different twist on your world building, and I'm in for the ride. That's fine.
I think some people also forget how young he was when he wrote that series.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like the fact that he made it so big, it's so young. Like, let's look past some of the similarities.
Yeah, no, totally. So tropes don't worry me so much in the stuff that I read. And when I'm looking for epic fantasy, it doesn't worry me if it's the basis of the story has been told 100 times before. Give me something different with the stage you set it on. That's fine.
Yeah.
Have me connect to the characters, or root for them and what they're doing. And I kind of go back to this idea that we were basically telling the same stories about heroes and gods around the campfire for centuries before new things started coming and all things started morphing out of that. And even then, the basic plots tend to remain the same. So that sort of thing doesn't worry me in my reading or what I'm looking for. And probably influences itself a bit in the type of stuff I write as well. I mean, I can't imagine that there's anything massively new in Blood of the Spear, but I've had really good feedback on my characters and the world building, the magic system in place, and then even positive references to not similarities, but the feel of the Wheel of Time in it. So that's cool. When I did start it, I was basically rewriting the Wheel of Time, and it was only later in the process that I was like, you can't do that. It's like, it has to be different. You have to make it more of your own. So that book has been rewritten about 9 times.
Wow.
Over the course of probably nearing 20 years, give or take. And that's not writing full time the entire time.
Right.
There were large gaps of putting it away in the drawer and not writing for years, and then pulling it out and going back to it. How did I come up with it? I'd been world building. I love world building. I love making notes. I love envisioning places. I draw maps. I do my own hand drawn maps first, and then when I go for publication, I hand it over to a mate, Deck Matthews, who redrew the map for me. I really like his style. He redid it for me, and I do all of that sort of stuff, and then I work out what all the different realms or kingdoms are like, what's, a basis for their cultural identity, and then I build from that. Have very loose timelines involved. I usually like to have some distant past event that might underpin a lot of the stuff that is working in the world today, that doesn't even need to be referenced directly in the story, but for me, it influences what I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
Mhm.
So I did a lot of that for a number of years, always, I'm going to write this book and I'm going to do this thing. But I didn't have a story. I didn't have, what's it actually going to be about? Like, who's your main character? And then I came across a painting by Larry Elmore. So he's one of the Wizards of the Coast artists, who did a lot of stuff with Dragonlance and Forgotten Realms and all of that stuff, Dragon Magazine. And it was a fight between a warrior or a knight and a magic user / shaman. And it was a still scene. And I was like, oh, wow, who are they? And in my head, I started creating this story about who are they? Why are they fighting? And that basically formed the two guys who became my main characters
Mm.
for my story. And then as soon as I had them, I was off and running. Like, well, I know where we're going to go to the end. I know that part. And I know particular spots in between the beginning and the end. Um, and a lot of the rest of it is still a little up in the air. I don't know specifically what's going to happen. So I'm kind of this hybrid. What is it? Seat of the Panther, or Panther?
Answer, yeah.
A Panther and a plotter. So I do have a plot. I have a direction. I remember having a conversation with Elizabeth Moon once. So I used to work for a independent science fiction fantasy bookshop in Sydney, Galaxy Bookshop, and they're the only one of its kind in Sydney. And we would, anytime a sci-fi or fantasy author would come through, they would come and visit, and we'd do signings and stuff like that. And I was talking to her about plotting, and she described it as exactly almost the same way. She would have a beginning and usually an end, and she would liken it to when she'd go hiking in the mountains, and she would start off at a ridge or somewhere, and the valley was covered in mist. She didn't know what was down in the valley, but she could see a peak or that she wanted to get to over the other side. So she knew where she was starting from, and she knew where she was going to go, where she was heading towards, but she didn't know what was in between.
Mhm.
And it was the actual act of writing or hiking, going through the walk, going down into the valley and out the other side, that created or evolved the story as she went. And that's probably a really good analogy for me too.
Mm.
I found I had previously, there was a stage where I thought I was going to be a contemporary author, an author of contemporary fiction. And I had plotted an entire book, and I'd plotted every single chapter out and everything that was going to happen in each chapter. And I got to the end and I was like, I've written it now. I don't want to go back and do it.
Yeah.
So I gave that away. And then I went back to my love of fantasy. And that time when I went back to my love of fantasy, I didn't do all of that. I
Mm.
just had notes. I had points on the map that I wanted to, and I don't mean the physical map that I drew, but in my head, the map of the story, I had points I wanted to get to. And I suppose I base the ebb and flow of the story on the structure of novels that I had previously read. So
Mhm.
I'd never done any formal training for writing or writing structure. I hadn't gone to uni and studied, gotten a master's in English literature or anything like that. It's all just been my high school education in English, and years of reading. Um, and that got me to where I went. And then I got beta readers, alpha and beta readers, who had a lot of experience in the genre as well, to give me feedback. And then I hired editors and I listened to them. it was a little bit hard at first. It took me a little while to get past the, okay, this is feedback and this is to help. It's actually not a criticism.
Right.
And I take feedback these days a lot better than I did previously, which is good considering it's now out in the public domain.
Right.
So,
it's a little too late if you didn't.
Yeah, right. So it was a long journey. And in that time, working at Galaxy and meeting other authors as well. So people like Karen Miller, Jennifer Fallon, Trudy Canavan, an Aussie author, Tony Shillito. I've gotten to meet Peter V. Brett when he came to Australia, George R. R. Martin twice when he's been out here, Richard Morgan. Lots of people come through. They've all been lovely. Built up some friendships with some of them as well. Karen Miller is a really good mate these days. I've beta read for her quite a bit. I inadvertently ended up getting an acknowledgement as a beta reader for one of Janny Wirt's books.
Oh, wow.
She, the publisher, HarperCollins, would send us advanced reading copies, and sometimes they'd just send us copies of the manuscript to read. And I got one of her books because I was a massive fan, and she knew I was reading it because I was active on her forums, and gave us some feedback of what I'd come across in, I found a particular passage or chapter a little bit dense, and I was tripping over some of the stuff that was happening. And, I think she had asked, or I'd offered it. She would have to have asked. I wouldn't have offered the feedback if I'm not asked. And
hey,
I gave her that.
This, but here.
Yeah. And she found that really helpful. And, so I kind of got an acknowledgement from her in that, which was great. I'd beta read so I did that for her. I'd beta read for Karen Miller, Jennifer Fallon. And that sort of experience helped as well. Seeing other writers work in a pre-published form before it's finished being polished, while it's still in the creation process, and watching them go through and change things and adapt and take feedback or critiques, suggestions, or even disregarding them if they don't match the vision of what they as the writer saw, or if something I pulled up as an issue wasn't flagged by anybody else. So, could just be a me thing.
Yeah.
And that's something you need to learn to determine as a writer as well when people give you feedback. Is that just them, or is that lots of people? So that's why having a number of beta readers is usually helpful.
Yeah.
If all of them are saying the same thing, it's probably an issue.
Should probably change it. Yeah, I know. I know, like Michael J. Sullivan has a lot of like beta and gamer readers for his books. I've done a couple. I did his most recent one for Nolan, and I did one for one of his Rairia books. But yeah, he's got like a massive amount of people, and there's like a whole Discord for it. Like, granted, his wife was the one compiling on the edits, and Michael's like, yes, I'll do that one. No, I won't do that one. I mean, at this point, he's probably just gonna say no to most of it unless it's formatting. So, but so I'm curious, being such a big Jordan fan, how did you find the trailer for the new Wheel of Time series?
I am cautiously optimistic. I know there's been I've been following all the people. Like I listen to the Will Weaves podcast, and they're not really talking about the television show, but they sometimes discuss things that have come through from Rafe Judkins, the showrunner. And I do watch the Dusty Wheel on YouTube and places like that. So I'm aware that the story is not going to be linear in terms of this is all of the eye of the world. They're going to mix and match some parts of different books together. My biggest, I don't even know if this is criticism because I am conflicted. It's a confliction I have, a conflict. Is just the imagery of Tavalon that they showed. So they showed the Tarvalon, and they showed the White Tower, and I'm like, I really, really like the aesthetic of it. I think it looks fantastic from a fantasy point of view, but from a Wheel of Time point of view, I'm kind of like, that's not a tower. That looks like a big hill. And I'm sorry, it's not white, it's beige. So I'm like, the Wheel of Time, it was like the shining city of Tarvalon. They had like the white shining walls. They had this massive tower. And I guess it's only that I've been reading it for, 30 odd years or whatever. And I've seen lots of artwork of depictions of Tarvalon, and they have a tower.
Right.
So in my head, I'm like, you're meant to have a tower. But that being said, I do like the look of it. I just find it hard to reconcile it with my internal imagery of what Tarvalon and the White Tower look like. That is a really small niggle, but it's the biggest thing. That was my biggest takeaway from the trailer, was like, that's not the White Tower. The rest of it, I'm fine with. It's always been for me one of those things where the images that you have in your book of character, of how things might look in your imagination to how they look on the screen, for me, rarely come out the same way.
Right.
And, when they were first announcing cast, and I was a little bit like, what? And then realizing, oh, you know what? They are actually right. A lot of my internal imagery of what the characters look like has been informed by the covers, and the covers were heavily whitewashed in terms of a reflection of what Jordan was actually writing. It's something that I just didn't even notice.
Yeah.
So no, I'm totally down for it. Don't care. I think it's more about how the people embody the character than how they physically look for the character. So I think it's really exciting. I am really looking forward to the 19th of November. So
you don't have it marked down your calendar.
No, I don't. Right?
An alert on your phone.
No, it's a Friday, which is really good. So I can stay up late after I finish work watching. I think they're releasing the first 3 episodes on the 19th, and then there's going to be 1 episode each Friday until the end of the year or something like that. So I'm like, that's my Friday night sorted.
Hey, I mean, I've taken off the entire week of Thanksgiving. So, I mean, if I don't get to a Friday, I'll definitely have plenty of days to get to it. So I'll have to avoid the internet for at least a few days if I don't get to it Friday.
So no, it looks good. I'm really, really keen to see how they actually tell the story. I know a lot of New Spring is going to be dropped in the first couple of episodes as well, or worked into it, which makes sense in terms of setting up the narrative for a visual audience. So yeah, I'm down for it.
Yeah, I think I saw like a notice of like, we're gonna have some of book 1, a little bit of book 2, and a little bit of book 3.
Yeah.
And I was like, so this is what we're doing. So for those who haven't read the series, you may as well just go ahead and read the first 4 books, because you need to read the prequel books too.
So like I was saying, I listened to the Will Weaves podcast, and they're basically it's a podcast for first time readers. There are no spoilers in it, but they've just finished the Fires of the Shadow Rising, I think. And instead of moving on to book 6, they're going to go and read New Spring now.
Yeah.
Because they know the television show is coming out, and it's going to have some of New Spring in it. So they want to get that done. I think Danny, she's never read the books. Brett, her co-host, has. He's like a massive fan. And so he's kind of like the guide. He sort of like, might answer some questions or tries to get her to speculate about what's happening. So there are all of us who are listening to her predictions or her commentary on what she's picking up first. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Because, I've been told that, and I haven't read the entire series, but I've been told like we were doing a read along for book 1 this past month, and I was told to read New Spring at least after book 4, because of the way the timeline works out and the way that story unfolds, is that it's a prequel, but you kind of like spoil a lot of stuff for the first 4 or so books.
So
the plan is to try to get first four, go back into spring, and then just like take a break
Yeah, yeah,
from
yeah.
the wheel for a little while.
Um, I haven't read the books, like physically read the words in a long time, but what I have taken to doing is listening to the audiobooks.
mhm.
The audios are so well done with Kate Redding and Michael Kramer. They're just amazing. It took me a little while to warm to Kramer. He can be a
Yeah,
little dry at first, but Kate
yeah.
Redding, oh my goodness, she could read the phone book and I would listen to it. She's amazing. Um, and I read slash audio listened to New Spring not too long ago, and I think it's one of the best last books that Jordan ever wrote,
Mhm,
because he was quite sick towards the end when he was doing the writing, and I think his last published book before he passed was really got the Wheel of Time back on track, because there'd been a number of books before those, and I need to look them up. I can't quite remember the titles, like Winter's Heart and stuff like that. And I know he had a massive cast of characters, but some of the books would only have half of the characters in it, and like one book had no Rand at all, who, as far as I was concerned, was the main
mhm.
as the Dragon Reborn. But spoiler, sorry. Um, and yeah, at the it was yeah, it was just so sad when for me, I'd been reading his stuff for years. So when he passed away, especially after the last book, was like, oh my god, this is back to what I remember the
Mhm,
first 5 6 books being like. Wow, this is fantastic. Sanderson did a great job finishing it off, but I'm always disappointed. In some ways, I mean, a massive tragedy that he passed away the way he did. But it's like, as a reader, I'm like, I loved Wheel of Time, was so formative for me in terms of writing and what sort of stories I want to tell.
mhm.
But I also wanted the opportunity to read his work in other worlds he created. So like not the Conan stuff, but like he'd had plans for a another series that he'd sold the rights to Tor about, that he was going to start after he finished Wheel of Time, and just like notes on the premise of that sounded fantastic. It was really exciting. It's like, yeah, give me more. I want as much different stuff by you as I can get. But it didn't happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, he
So
he had one come out posthumously, right? It was the Warrior of the Altai.
yeah, yeah, the Altai. I pronounce it Altai. Yeah, he did. And that was the first book he had ever sold.
Mm,
And because of editorial changes at the company who bought it, it never got printed.
mm.
Um, and then I believe Tor picked it up,
Yeah.
and then he started writing Conan stuff with them instead. And they never got around to printing that either. And then went to Wheel of Time, and Wheel of Time took off, so it never got around to being printed. And his comments at the end were that he'd written the book, but it will never see the light of day
Mm,
because it needs to be rewritten.
mhm,
So he obviously never got around to doing that. And his wife slash editor uh, worked at getting it released, fixed up and released. And it was good. And you can see a lot of ideas he took from that and used to flesh out into the Wheel of Time as well.
mhm,
But it wasn't up to his Wheel of Time writing.
mhm,
In fact, rereading the Wheel of Time, if you start from book 1 to book 3, you can see the ideas he had in book 1 get developed and fleshed out into his own ideas, and almost completely dropped by the time you get to book 3. And
mm,
it's like, oh wow, it's like I can see you world building as you write and discarding old stuff. And now all of a sudden, this is it. And this, you found your groove. This is what your thing is. And you've moved through the rest of the story with it. Um, if somebody is that into it and wants to read it multiple times to actually start picking that stuff up and noticing it. But, I did. A lot of my reading is often educational, I
mhm,
guess. I'll look at it, I'll look at what I'm reading. And certainly when I was beta reading or even writing reviews for Galaxy, it used to be, I got to the stage where I was like, well, yeah, you can like something or you can dislike something, but why are you liking it and why are you disliking it? So becoming critical of that sort of thing really helped me determine what it was that I liked in writing and what it is I don't like and why I don't like it.
mhm.
Um, and it's still it's very hard for me these days when I read to not have my red pen going in my head as I'm reading it, and finding an author where that doesn't happen is like, oh my God, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
So when I get somebody who I just forget I'm reading, I forget to be critical as I'm reading because I'm so wrapped up in it.
Yeah.
That's just, they're like instantly top of my list of favorite writers.
I gotcha. Yeah, the whole Sanderson coming in and finishing the series, like I'm hoping that's not gonna happen with like Martin. Like we've been we're over a decade now. Clearly, everybody knows that. You do have the people that are daily just going, oh my gosh, when's it gonna finish? But like you kind of hope it doesn't come to that point where like he's like on the verge of finishing, and hopefully he doesn't have a tragic passing away and somebody's got to pick it up, because I'm like, well, who would pick it up? And then you've got 2 more books that you gotta write, and you've got to make them just as good, if not better than the others, and you've got to make up for what everybody says is a horrible end to the series. So it's interesting, because I'm hoping it doesn't get to that point, but I'm like, man, if it took over a decade to get this book out, I can't imagine how long it's going to take to get the next 2 out, unless he just has them and he's just like, I'm going to release them all at the same time. I don't see that happening, but
I don't think so. I don't think he has them. I think he's pretty open about his progress or his lack of progress on things.
Yeah. Plus he's got like all these like shows that he's like behind and all stuff. Like he's got plenty going on.
Yeah, he does. And like, to my mind, some of that is possibly a bit of procrastination. When you get stuck somewhere, or you get stuck on a story or a thread and you don't know where to take it, or it's really, really difficult to write, you look for other things to distract you from having to do that.
Yep.
Like, oh, well, I can't do that at the moment because I've got this other thing that's I'm actually able to do easily and quickly. So I'll do that. And I mean, I don't know. Gosh, George probably wouldn't even know me if he recognized me if he saw me in the street. So I've only met him, like I said, twice, and it was only brief chats both times. But just from reading his blog posts, and we had other authors through the store who are part of his writing group, and we mentioned waiting on the next Song of Ice and Fire book, and they're like, no, he is working on it. He is. I promise you, sort of thing. So it's like, okay, yeah, it's a thing. I was really worried when we had him in the store for a signing that people would start harassing him about like, when's the next book? Where is it? But the publishers were like, nah. The people who come to signings are fans.
Yeah,
they want to meet. They want to get a signature. They want to say,
oh yeah.
Yeah. They're not going to come to say, where's the next bloody book?
Yeah. Yeah, those people don't drive to signings. No, these are people that actually like want to meet the author that wrote the books and get their signature, get a picture with them. I mean, I don't think I've ever been to a signing before where somebody is like avidly complaining to the author about anything. Granted, I haven't been to that many signings, but the ones that I have been to, they've been very clean and clear. So, but yeah, it's one of those things. Like I just know he's trying to make it the best that he's making it, and it doesn't bother me at all. I'm of the notion that there are so many other books to read, and when it finally does come out, it'll jump to the top of my TBR. That's kind of how it is at this point. I've found so many debut authors, indie authors, and trade that have just blown me away, and I'm like, game of what?
Yeah.
What's Game of Thrones? People
and look,
still
to
read
be
that?
honest, having gotten to the end of the television series, even whatever the last season was, getting to the end of the story and knowing what happens, even if George is going to change some parts leading to that end, the end's still going to be the end, basically. Right. So I know where it's going now. So I'm like, the urgency in reading the next book or even the last book is gone. I'll read it when they come out, but I'm not like chomping at the bit to get to them. It's like, I don't have to have them now. I can wait now and read it when it happens.
Yeah, and I mean, people do the same thing with Rothfuss and Lynch and stuff. And I'm like, I count myself lucky because I haven't gotten sucked into those fandoms. So like, I'm kind of like okay waiting for the next books to come out and then I'll do the series. Because I've like thought about for probably 4 years, like I need to read Name of the Wind, and I have all my co-bloggers are like, you need to read Name of the Wind. I'm like, I have all these other things that like I want to get to, like finish series.
Yeah, and it's funny is because like growing up, when I started reading stuff like in the 90s, there was no internet then. There was no notes on when the next book was coming out. You'd get one book and there would be like, do you just wait? You wait for the next one. So I don't know, maybe I've been trained. I've been trained to have long periods of wait time between my books.
Right.
So now it's like, yeah, I'll read a book. I'll read a series as it's being written. I'll read the books when they come out. I don't have to wait and read them all, binge them all in one go. In fact, sometimes I get fatigue doing that. So give me lots of different things to read in between them and I'm fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say, like, I'm going through The Song of Ice and Fire. I've read the first one like 3 times and the second one a couple of times. I never actually gotten through them. Well, Storm of Swords is my favorite so far. But, like, I'm really like struggling through A Feast for Crows. Like, it's a struggle. Like, there's not a whole lot going on, and I'm like, take the show out of it. Like, I know how the seasons play out and stuff, but like, I'm like, man, somehow I've got to get through this book. 'Cause I have to imagine, A Dance with Dragons is better, but like, it is so hard getting through this book.
It is and it isn't.
Yeah.
I hate to disappoint you. And what frustrates me as well is that he will spend 500 pages having introduced a new character only to kill them by the end of the book. And I'm like, what was the point? Like, literally, I don't know what the point of this character was. I don't feel that it actually progressed the plot in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And the book would have been no poorer for them not having been in there. I don't.
And especially in this volume, I mean, there are all these characters introduced, and I go like into the wiki, and I'm like, I don't remember this character. Like, again, show is different than the book. I'm like, I don't remember this character. And it says, oh, they were a minor character, and this character was actually never in the show, so they just didn't even put them in there. And I go, so now they're dead, and like, there was like 200 pages that could have just been nothing, and you could have just, kept on with the same 20 other characters that we've been reading about for 4 books.
I mean, and that being said, Martin's writing is beautiful.
Oh yeah.
Like his turn of phrase is, can stop me in my tracks when I read. So I don't begrudge reading stuff, but sometimes when you're having long periods of time, like, almost decades between books, and you get this book and you're like, what? Why? This is part of why have we not progressed the story? Why have we got this instead? Because I love your writing, but I'm also invested in the story, and I want to see the story progress.
So far A Feast for Crows has just been like people talking about how ugly Brienne of Tarth is. Like for like 300 pages, and I'm like, oh gosh, where's Jaime Lannister when you need him?
Well, so he had
that good quit by Tyrion. Like, I need something.
He had that whole thing where he had to cut Dance of Dragons in 2. That's where Feast for Crows came from, and he cut basically. Or did he say everything that's happening in the south, the east, the south and the west, and then everything in the north and the far east happens in Dance of Dragons. So you only get half of each. It's kind of like, too bad if one of your main characters, if you were reading it when it was published, because then you just had to wait years again for the next lot of story for the other story. But that does concern me a little bit in terms of juggling storylines, because my book starts off with, you've got Carl and Darian, who are the 2 brothers are my mains, but then you have their friends around with them, Meg, Savani, Sim, even the captain of the Rangers, Jarek, and Starbinder, Ayanna, and her outsider, Leon, and other characters are going to come in. So they basically spend most of all of this book traveling together before they get separated towards the end. So the next book, they are going to be they won't be together in chapters, and there's going to be different threads and different storylines coming in. And I'm thinking, hold on. This is one of these things where you don't plan everything out beforehand. You've suddenly got all these threads going in different directions, and you've got to work their stories so their stories have ebbs and flows and are compelling. and still interest people and want them to keep reading. And then
Mm,
you need to work out how much time are you going to give each one of these threads, and how many pages is that adding to the book, and
yeah.
how much longer is the series going to be to resolve all these things that are just developing. They start growing. It's like in this book, The Blood of the Spear, in one of my rewrites, I decided, no, um, these characters who were going to be, Ayanna and Leon, had started at the beginning of the book and worked their way all the way through with everybody else. And then I thought, no, you know what? It actually works better if they come in at the middle of the book. So I then had to go back and pull them out. And it is like pulling a thread in a rug. You've got, like, they are intertwined in everything.
Right.
And you've got to pull it all out and then fix up the gaps where they were and hope you haven't missed them and left them in there somewhere. I think I've got it out. It's gone through enough edits now that I'm pretty sure they're all gone. But I still worry that someone's going to come around and say, what was that there? I'm like,
Yeah.
what? But it's a really difficult thing to do. It's like bone and sinew. It's like it's all entwined. It's hard to take these threads apart. And then when they start growing out in their own directions, you got to get the hedge trimmers out and start shaping. Cut off here, cut off there, redirect the flow. Yeah. So
That's like so I went and reread the first three books in Josiah Bancroft's Books of Babel series, because you got the fall coming out. And
right.
I sent him a Twitter DM, and I go, why is the Sphinx referenced as a female to some and a male to others? And then literally my question got answered 5 minutes later. And but like that whole like 5 minutes where I was sitting there pondering it, I'm going, did Josiah do that on purpose, or did like somebody not catch this? And then, literally it was answered because like a character was like, why is that happening? And I go, why did I just wait and just not ask, just wait and have it explained to me? So it's always interesting because you're talking about having to go back through and make sure you didn't miss anything. I'm always curious, if authors do that, if there's like a she misplaced or a he, or somebody's name gets left because they didn't do a control F and find all the names.
Yeah. I have a friend who's a traditionally published author, and she was writing the most recent book in her series, and she was bringing a character that hadn't been around for a couple of books back into it, and had to go back and work out what color eyes she'd given them, only to find that in various books they had different colored eyes. So
so the eyes were different depending on their mood. So
yeah, right. It's like, so I made sure I have got an Excel file I've got with character descriptions and names and where they first came in, and then I can go back and like, oh, who was that and what did they look like? Right, okay, thank you. Because there are some side characters that I mentioned once, and I'm just like, I have no idea what I named that person.
Right.
Who are they?
because they'll come back around and you're like, crap, I know I had this person somewhere. Yeah. So can you tell me, what is The Blood of the Spear about?
It is about a world that has been, torn asunder by a war between a race. Magic users that are called summoners. They had the ability to summon elementals that gave them great power, and they built this massive civilization. And then some of the summoners, looking for immortality, opened a rift, I guess you would call it, or a portal into the void, and made pacts with dark powers there and began summoning demons. And so a massive war came out between the summers, like a civil war, and destroyed the world as everyone knew it, and led to the extinction of summoners. Because it's a specific, you're either born a summoner or you're not, or you develop powers of a summoner. And the ability to summon is identified by a mark that appears on the back of your hand, almost like a tattoo, but it's kind of like a holographic tattoo that sits above the skin. So anybody who develops that mark now is basically executed. So summoners aren't around anymore. But some of the demons and the tears in realities are still around, and the demons come out and all that sort of stuff. And at the end of that war, there was a prophecy made that the demon queen who had tempted these summoners to the dark side would return, or she would come again, and the demon hordes would come again, and an emperos. So an emperos was the most powerful of summoners, basically the title of their leader. Someone who had the ability to become an emperos would be born, and only their rising to power would be able to save the world from the return of the demon queen and her hordes. And so that prophecy has been floating around for years and years and years. And the Blood of the Sphere is about two half brothers, Kyle and Darian Torrance, and the discovery that their bloodline is directly related to one of the last emperors who had been around 3,000 years ago, and the discovery of the bronze spear. So the bronze spear is an ancient relic or artifact that was created by the summoners, and Kyle, to everybody else, it looks like an old spear with a rusty head on it. When Kyle picks it up, it transforms into this beautiful magic bronze, looks like bronze headed spear. And that's like the first sign of the prophecy sort of thing, the return of this spear. So they are literally the blood of the spear. And factions start going after them for control. Some to kill them, get rid of them, others because they have different agendas, that they want someone who would have the power of a summoner to help fulfill. And these guys are like, we just want to live our lives, leave us alone. They had their own plans and their own hopes and dreams, and so they take off. And so it's a bit of a chase in some regards about them trying to get away from Prince Alessander, who is a character in the first half of the story, who they have some involvement with, and who wants them for his own schemes. And Darian, who wants to become a magic user, or Soralis, and he's kind of like doesn't want a part of any of this. It's not his thing. He's heading off to Solier and the Soralis and the Palace of the Eye of Eternity, and he's going to learn how to wield the light of the eye. And Kyle, as the older brother, because they're all, not all the family they have, but their mother had passed away not long before the story had started. They don't know their fathers. Because they're the only family that got, Kyle is like the big brother, I have to protect you. And this is a bad thing. You shouldn't be, wanting to learn how to wield the light of the eye. It only comes to bad things. And then they're both marked with this blood of the summoners. And he's kind of following Darian to make sure he's okay. And their friends get caught up in it as well. And they have their own hopes and dreams and plans of what they want to do. And then halfway through, they meet the Shalloway Starbinder, Iana, whose order were the ones who made the prophecy, and she has her own agendas as well. So there's lots of politics and different power groups and stuff, and lots of chasing, and the demons are part of it, and they all come into it. So it's about what's going to happen between the two of them, like mainly who is the one who's going to have the mark of the summoners, who is going to be the one who has the ability to become an emperos. Either of them, both of them, all those sorts of questions. And towards the end of the book, there's been a demon chasing them as well. And towards the end of the book, there's big battles. And well, there's battles throughout the book, but there's a massive one at the end. And a lot of them get separated after that. So there's a little bit of a cliffhanger at the end in terms of, there's a resolution, but in terms of what happens next, there's a cliffhanger.
I gotcha.
Yeah, so it's two brothers, one prophecy, and a world in peril, which is my tagline.
It's perfect tagline.
Yeah, right. So I've gotten really, really good feedback So I'm really pleased. Whenever, you know, I hire these editors and they tell me X, Y, and Z, and, you know, that they enjoyed it and all this sort of stuff. I'm like, oh, yeah, but, you know, did you? But you give it out to people or bloggers who have, you know, no need to say, yes, I enjoyed it, other than, yeah, they did enjoy it. So
Mhm.
getting that feedback that I have gotten so far has been so rewarding. It's been an absolute thrill. I've been quite lucky with my feedback so far. You know, enjoy it while it lasts. It may not, and that's okay. But while it does, I'm really, really happy. I just need more people to read it and love it.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Which is,
understand.
you know, it's the struggle. It's
Yeah.
like what somebody likened author an author, particularly self-published authors, trying to get people to read your book is like walking to a room of screaming toddlers and asking them to pay attention to you. It's like it's you know, struggle, but
Yeah.
you know, we'll see how we go.
Yeah, I mean, and and you're in Spiffbo. So
Yeah.
how's that experience been for you so far?
Well, to be honest, pretty quiet for me. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm still in it. I haven't been cut yet, so
Hey,
that's good. Yeah.
hey, I mean, you made the top 150, so
Yeah, right. Although I am in the group with Dragon Mage by ML Spencer. So I'm kind of like, oh, I'm dreading that because it's a killer book. It's so good. And she's just been getting praise after praise after praise. And like, so I'm just like, will I, you know, going up against that as becoming a favorite to be pushed forward is always a bit of a, I don't know how we're going to go, but hey, I'm in it and that's great.
yeah,
And any exposure is good exposure. So more people who see it, just because somebody didn't like it, their reasons for not liking it might sound to somebody else the reason that they would. So who knows?
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's it's one of those things that it's free to enter and it's free publicity, and you've got
Absolutely.
at least a blog, if not potentially multiple blogs, reading it, and that means
Yeah.
even multiple readers from those blogs reading it. And if anybody's talking about it, it gets pushed out to a bunch of other people. You do the SOT tour. So man, it'll get there. I know. It's like luck of the draw. I mean, you've got some books that are really great that don't hit their stride for a while, then you have some that just hit just really hard on like that specific day for some reason. But I know it'll get there. You've got a killer cover, you've got a killer premise.
Yeah, definitely.
It's only a matter of time. So well, tell me, last question I got for you. What are some books you read recently that you'd recommend?
I would recommend, well, Dragon Mage. That's amazing. I'm currently reading The Desert Prince by Peter V. Brett, which is also really exciting. He's one of those writers that's gone up towards, my top 10 in over the years with his was it the Watered Man cycle or the Demon Cycle, I think is
Demon
the
Cycle.
original.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Demon Cycle. Yep. Um, I have read recently Ryan Cahill's novel of Blood and Fire, and that was a lot of fun.
Mhm.
Um, anything by Melissa McPhail. If you've never read any of her stuff, you're missing
Okay.
out. She is an indie published author as well. Has done 6 books in the series so far. I think one more is coming. The Patterns of Light and Shadow is her
Okay.
series. Really, really good stuff. And it's really hard off the top of my head. What else have I read? I just finished reading and I binged this like nothing on the planet. The Cradle series by Will White.
Uh
I
my
love
co-blogger David
that.
Schaefer is like the biggest fan, and apparently Will's at
Yeah.
Dragon Con. He's just a couple
Oh,
hours
really?
away from me right now. Yeah, he and
Oh, wow.
Travis Baldry are both there. They like met for the first time.
Okay.
I don't know if you listen to the audiobooks, but Travis does all the audio for the Cradle
No,
series. So
no,
like
I
they
didn't.
have all these books together, and they just like finally met for the first time.
Oh, cool. That's
Mm-hmm.
awesome. So yeah, no, that was my first real adventure in I think they're calling it progression fantasy now, aren't they, or something? Cultivation.
Cultivation, yeah.
Yeah, cultivation. Yeah. So I'm really, really into that. Like I dig it. And because like I play a lot of World of Warcraft. And one of the things I like the most about it is leveling up. I love
Mhm.
taking my character from 0 and being like next to nothing in terms of power and getting them to max level. I really, really love it. So coming across books that write like that as well, where you watch characters level up,
Mhm.
really, really get into that. So next to epic fantasy, that's probably my next new favorite thing.
I gotcha.
So there's a lot of stuff for me to look for in that, because I had read as well the which is a little bit similar, the Iron Prince. Is it the
Oh yeah,
Iron
yeah,
Prince
yeah.
by
For
Bryce
by Marcel
O'Connor? And
O'Connor. Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah, that was amazing. That was so
That's a
good.
chunk of a book
It
too.
is, and I devoured it. I couldn't put it down. Like it was for ages. I was like going, am I going to like this or not? I loved it. Really good book.
That's awesome.
So
Yeah, we've
yeah.
actually got we've got Quantum Cultivation by J.C. King in our pool for Spiffbo.
Okay.
So that might be another one to look forward to
Yeah.
if you really, like you said, you enjoyed Will White's book. So
Yeah.
well, that's awesome. That's a great list of books. I definitely appreciate that. But Mark, I really thank you so much for taking the time to come chat with
You're
me.
welcome.
Best of luck in Spiffbo with the Blood of the Spear.
Thank you.
I gotta share the cover one more time. I know it's gonna be a little glossy, but yeah, Blood of the Spear, the Eye of Eternity book 1 is available. It's 99 cents right now if you want a Kindle copy, or you can get a hardcover or a paperback. But yeah, best of luck in Spiffbo. Best of luck with book 2.
Thank
Definitely
you.
we'll look forward to seeing the cover for it as well.
Yeah.
And Mark, we'll have to do this again sometime.
That would be great. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely.